Welcome to the Teacher's Pep Rally. If you missed our last episode with Dr. Janine Janot, author of The Disintegrating Student, please go back and check it out. Our guest today has a master's degree for secondary learning. She taught language arts and social studies to 6th and 8th graders. Staying true to being an educator, she now teaches students yoga as a way to allow kids to learn about themselves in new ways so they can skillfully navigate the ups and downs of life. She is a co-founder of Grounded Kids. Please welcome to the Teacher's Pep Rally and say namaste to our guest, Amy Haysman.
Namaste.
Nice to be here. Thank
Welcome
you.
to the Teacher's Pep Rally.
Wow, that was our
It's
most
fun here.
quiet, soothing welcome ever, Amy.
We're already zen.
I'm inhaling my essential oil.
Just your presence alone. Hey, we're so happy to have you here.
I'm really glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so let's get right into it. So I mentioned that you were a middle school teacher. So let's talk a little bit about what I'll call the traditional classroom, but I think everywhere in life we have classrooms, right? Tell us a little bit about your classroom. First, my question I love to ask is, tell me what it looked like. Like, give us a picture of it.
All right. Well, it was organized chaos, which in any middle school classroom, that means there's learning and creativity going on. I had the desks in a big rectangle around the whole room. So we had a middle section that was the open floor, where kids could come and sit on the floor on cushions and pair up. And my style was writing workshop. So my whole classroom for language arts and social studies, it was interdisciplinary. I taught it where the children would have a mini lesson at the beginning of the class, just like 10 or 15 minutes to go over what I realized they needed for either grammar or vocabulary or writing skills, a social studies concept, and then they would work on their own. They would write and they would revise and they would peer edit. And eventually we would get to the publishing process, which would look like either a class newspaper where we would make copies and send poetry out. We would publish joke books. We would publish children's books where they would be the illustrators and the authors based on, say, something we were studying in history. And it was just really organic and based on what the kids needed. And in that way, they had ownership of the classroom. And it really was our learning classroom. It wasn't my classroom. And they came and, had to pay attention to me lecture for 55 minutes.
I can so picture that. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Sounds lovely. And I've never seen it where the desks are kind of around and then the center is the space. I like that a lot. I think that that's something that is unique and it almost makes it feel like it's reminiscent of like when I used to make forts and things. And a lot of times it wasn't just to be creative, but it was so that you felt like you had your safe kind of own space to be creative or do whatever you wanted to do. So that's kind of what it reminds me about.
Yeah, and when I did have something important to say, I would go in the middle and have the kids sit on their desks facing in.
Right.
And they enjoyed that freedom to move their bodies because middle schoolers, they're growing. So like they don't realize from day to day how long their arms are or how long their legs are. And to have just freedom to not sit in a chair for the entire time is really important for them to get that body awareness.
I love it. I bet, Pete, can you relate to that a little bit? I'm thinking of you in the music classroom.
Totally. And, like the size of those arms and legs change as the day goes on for some of them. They're like, well, where did that go?
Yeah.
So, no, I'm on the same page 100%. And we have a situation that I'm a music teacher in our classroom. We have that. It's sort of the instruments and the stations are on the outskirts, the perimeter and the center. That's our town square. That's our stage per se. So that's where everybody would go to meet up and perform. So I love it. We're totally there.
Man, I'm gonna nerd out even more. So I'm taking this class and we're talking about street data, and it's kind of talking about like the original. We were talking about, yes, we're talking about classrooms, like before we even had like traditional classrooms, and
Mhm.
we had tribes and small communities where that's what you did, right? You got into circles and you had the kids kind of exploring and learning and being supported by the rest of the community, the adults, the grandparents, the ancestors all around you. So I'm feeling a little bit of that right now as Amy and Pete are talking. So Amy, tell us what were some of your favorite things about working with middle schoolers? Because that you mentioned how their bodies are kind of
Yeah.
changing and they can't sit still real easily and they've got a lot going on. So what was that like?
I love the hilarity of it all. I mean, they're hilarious. They're, one day they're acting like they have it all figured out and they're adults and they're ready to, live on their own. And then the next day they're coming in whining about something, and they're bringing their teddy bear to school. I mean, it's really just a full gamut within one individual. They're just trying to figure out who they are. And I'm really like, I can look back now and realize the seeds of what interests me so much about yoga is what drew me to a middle school child. Who am I? Who am I in the world? Who am I in my community? Just trying to answer that basic question.
I love it. And Letitia, I could see you smiling because
I mean, I love her.
I know, Letitia, you're seeing these boys coming
Jeez.
into your office, right? Same types of things.
Yes.
One day they're one person because they're trying to figure out who they are. So they're trying to represent themselves to their community, to their group, to their peers. But
Hmm.
then at the same time, they're still kids.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, Amy, I'm this year I'm actually functioning as a high school and middle school counselor of
Lovely.
an all boys academy. So I get
Wow.
legs and 6 feet people around me all day. And you are absolutely right. One day they're grown and in relationships and asking me for advice, like they're grown men. And then the
Hmm.
next day they're playing with my little Rubik's cubes and my fidgets and they're laughing. And I mean, these kids are in high school, like 12th grade. And I said to one today, I said, boy, it looks like you're having fun. Like you don't really get a chance to just be a kid. And he
Hmm.
said, you're right. And so, it's to your point, the gamut and the laughter. I mean, they crack me up. It's really
Yes.
hilarious.
And you don't expect the depth of just feeling and emotion to come out of a kid that's such a goofball. But when I got them writing and in yoga, when I get them just in their body and then sharing their experience, it's really deep stuff. I mean, they are very wise.
And they're
You know,
raw. It's
yeah,
raw.
yeah.
Yes,
If anything, in
raw.
high school, the rawness gets subdued a little bit because everybody's finding their way. And in middle school, like you said, it's this chaotic soup. And that, and I have so much respect for middle school teachers. I'll never forget, I had a professor in college, and this was her stick. She would say, you teach elementary for love of the kid, you teach high school for love of the subject, but nobody knows why anybody would teach middle school. And that's what she was teaching us. So I
Right.
was like, what's this problem with middle school? And my first experience in the classroom with performing and with a group was in middle school. And I was terrified, but it was one of my best experiences. I loved it. So it does take a special person, though, to be there and to succeed there and flourish there. And not burn out. So kudos to you guys for living in that place.
Definitely. The memories of middle school for me are that is the awkward for middle school for me was 6 through 8. So that was a really awkward time for me. I could remember, from wearing glasses and to the physical aspects of the limbs, and I wasn't a big guy
Hmm.
anyway. But it's an incredibly awkward time. So yeah, kudos to you to get them to be aware of their physical self and then their mental self, right?
Which,
Yeah, we're
Amy, Okay, I'm sorry, dear. Go ahead.
No, you go. You go.
I was going to say, just ask your opinion, because one of the things that I'm noticing is that because this generation is so overly stimulated by social media and video games, I'd like to circle it back to get your expertise, but because of that overstimulation, they can't even identify feelings, number one, right? Like what feelings they're feeling. They have no concept of that. And then because they're so overstimulated, they don't even know how emotions or how their body is talking to them when they're anxious or when they're stressed or angry. And so I think, your work is so critical and so important because it brings to them that awareness that even their bodies are wise, right? And their bodies are talking to them. And so I would love to hear your take on, the connection between yoga and that, because I'm going to get these 6 feet tall boys meditating if it's the last thing that I do.
Yeah, sure, sure. So the first thing I do is I educate them on the concept that when we are so focused outwardly, we entrain to that level of energy, and it's very quick and fast, and it is chaotic, and it's very stimulating, and they think that they're enjoying it because that's what they're used to. So we get used to a certain state of feeling and a certain state of being, and then when we disconnect from that, so let's say like they're on the computer and they're on their text messaging and video gaming and all of that, and then they go into a space like maybe they go somewhere where they're unplugged, or maybe they come into a yoga class. It's going to feel uncomfortable at first. And that's completely natural because your nervous system has to adjust, and that adjustment doesn't feel good. So the time that it takes to kind of detox from that overstimulation is uncomfortable. And I just upfront tell them that, and it's gonna feel weird and awkward, and you're gonna want to put on the loud music and get back to that state that you're used to vibrating at, but just give it a moment. You have to trust in this process and trust yourself. And as soon as it happens for them, like once they get a hit of what it feels like to be paying attention inwardly, it's really empowering, because then they realize, oh, this is where they get in their body and they realize, okay, this is where my truth is. This is what feels true to me. Because all that other stuff, when we pay attention outwardly, it's distraction, and they're having to pretend, or they're having to fit this character that they've, they're trying to impress somebody, or win at a game, or be the wittiest in a conversation. And so as soon as they can unplug from that and turn inward, they're just with themselves, and the competition and the doubt and all of that stress can dissipate. And then they have a moment to realize, okay, this is where I am. This is who I am at my center, at my core. I can connect to that truth and really feel like myself. It's kind of like, have you ever gotten off track, and maybe it's in a relationship or in a job, or you start a habit and it doesn't feel true to you. And then when you come back to yourself, it's a relief. It's like the stress and the tension can dissipate. And in that, they can find peace and contentment and the power, their own power, their personal power, to really stand up for what they believe in, and realize that they don't have to be any different They don't have to do anything else or be someone else to be accepted and loved and worthwhile and valued. And that's a charge, to know that you can be yourself.
Okay, I have a question then. So, I mean, if you're listening to this, and you're hearing the word yoga, I'll play the ignorant person in the space. I don't know what yoga is. But I hear the words meditation, so automatically my thoughts go to a room where everybody now has to sit still and they just practice breathing. But it's not, right? It's a combination of a physical exertion, in a way, with that centeredness. Could you maybe just kind of explain what that balance is between the physical and the mental, like that physical activity with the meditative aspect?
Sure. So yoga is a practice where you connect your mind and your body and your breath. And there's poses that are sitting on the ground on your yoga mat. There's poses where you move in rhythm to your breath. There's poses where you're holding a shape and balancing. There's all sorts of different shapes that we make with our body. Many of them come from nature and are inspired by animals and just what is in nature. Whatever's happening at the level of the mind is also happening at the level of the body. So if our mind is, stimulated and stressed out, our body is absorbing all of that energy, and we become tense and rigid and tight. And so moving the body and opening and creating space in the body opens and creates space in the mind. And it's in that space that we can pause and come back to the present moment where everything is okay. And so it's really not something to be afraid of. It's something to be curious about.
That's really cool. That was a really cool definition of it. That opening of spaces is just a fascinating idea in my, in my own mind. That's cool though. Thanks though. I appreciate that.
You're
and the only reason why I
welcome.
asked that is because I think, for going to Letitia's comment about the 12th grader, and you toss out the word meditate, they're going to look like you're crazy. Like, why do I need to be doing that? That sounds like a woo-woo thing, or, but I kind of wonder too, in the world, there's symbolism. So there's a new Marvel movie out, and there's a certain Asian character in it. And that is all part of that belief system and that practice. And that's where I have that's where I come from. I come from the martial arts background. So, and that's where I was introduced to it. But it wasn't nowhere where you're taking it now with students. And that's where I wish it would have. I think I really would have liked to have latched onto that. But I think culture can help us a little bit in embracing some of these somewhat alien concepts. I'll use the word alien. That's not the right one though, Letitia, I don't think. But I mean, yeah, they're gonna be like, you want me to sit what? You want me to breathe how? So
Right. And to Amy's point, I've taken the position as I'm always going to be an educator. But I think education is so important, and it matters that I'm working with boys, rather, that we have about probably 98% African American. And so they're just not even exposed to the whole idea of, number one, therapy. That's just not common language, and yoga and meditation. But I think when you start, to your point, Amy, I'm using education, like teaching them about the brain and the dopamine that you get, every time you're on your phone. And when we take that phone away, your body literally needs a blast of dopamine, because you want to have that feel good stuff, right? But and I'm noticing that when I talk to them either privately or in smaller groups, right, not with the whole group instruction, it's a very different take. They're more open because of that social pressure. Right. Now they're coming into my office and taking a look at the brain. And one scholar said today, okay, so I lost my temper. What part of the brain again is it that, and I was like, okay, we'll get the model, bring it here. Here it is.
That's cool.
This is what was impacting, your decisions today. So I love this idea of educating, and then the other layer of that I wanted to share is, everything you mentioned, Amy, and then you add other life stressors like poverty, coming back to a pandemic and everybody trying to act like it's business as usual. They have additional, it's like they're almost on constant fight or flight. There is no calm.
Yes. And that's what trauma does. The trauma of poverty, the trauma that we've all collectively experienced and are still experiencing with COVID. And when we are affected by trauma, like you said, we live in that stress response part of our brain where our choices are very limited to the fight, flight, freeze, faint, fawn. We really have only a few choices. It's been proven that one of the only ways that really does heal trauma, those grooves in the brain that we get stuck in, where we repeat patterns and we get stuck in the reptilian part of our brain, is breathing and meditating and moving your body to release that stress. I know that we are going to talk about resources in a little while, but I'm really, really interested in this topic. And one of the best books that I have, can I share that now?
Please share
While we're on
the
this topic?
perfect. Yes.
Oh, yes, that book is amazing. Okay.
So
the
there's
body
the body
keeps the score.
Yes.
And then there's my friend Livia Shapiro has written a book called The Somatic Therapy Workbook. And this is another one. I highly recommend that teachers read these two books first for themselves, because it all starts with ourselves, right? Before we can teach something, we practice it to really be able to teach authentically. And yes, I love that you teach these kids about their brain, because then it takes it away from, I'm a horrible person. I messed up and it's my fault. And then they start to feel shame and they will repeat that pattern. It turns, you explain the physiology of it. And it's like, okay, this is happening because I'm a human being, because I am, I was born this way. And, our survival instinct is important, but we don't have to live there.
No.
Yeah.
So I want to grab so many tips from Amy right now. So I'm going to try to pace myself. So Amy, tell me
Take your time. Take your time here.
Too strong. Okay. My first thought is, what's the grade range or what's the ages that you tend to teach yoga with first?
So I originally created Grounded Kids Yoga for 7 and up, so 7 through teens, because that was the age that interests me, were the slightly older kids. We do have a program called Pre-Grounded where we start with 3-year-olds, planting the seeds of body awareness and breath awareness and all these concepts, these virtues like patience and perseverance.
Imagine.
Yeah.
We all need that. I think adults as well.
Can we all get on the mat there together? Because we need that.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the second part to that is, I'm imagining a room full, or even you've been doing, I know, virtually, remotely, online with COVID, depending on, how bad the numbers are in your communities. So how do you get a bunch of kids to start a yoga class? Like, how do you begin? I can't even imagine.
Take a comfortable seat on your mat. Put one hand on your heart. Do this, you guys. Put one hand on your belly. So you've got one hand on your heart, one hand on your belly. So we're physically hardwired to respond to touch, right? That's just how we're built. So when you hold your heart and you hold your belly, you're bringing yourself back into your body and back into the moment. And then I'll say, close your eyes if that's comfortable for you, and breathe through your nose. When you're breathing through your nose, obviously your mouth is closed. So that cuts out the talking. That cuts out all the chatting. And then I'll say, breathe into your hands. It gives them that physical reference. So I make it very tangible. So they're breathing into their hands and they're getting that deep belly breath. Their lungs are expanding. And what's happening in the brain is the stress response, all the adrenaline and the cortisol and all that. Your nervous system is now being regulated. You're not in your stress response anymore. And you can think more clearly. The executive function part of your brain is now in charge. So notice how you feel.
Wow. That really did make
Yeah.
a difference. How about you guys? Pete, you good?
I have a hard time closing my eyes when Fred's around.
You
but-
don't have to close
but-
your eyes.
No, I was joking. No, this is beautiful. I've seen this in my school and it is so beneficial. It's so great at resetting. It's excellent.
Another tool that I use is a
Oh,
singing bowl. So
Love this. Love
I
it.
taught with a couple of other teachers at an elementary school in Atlanta, Title I school. So we had funds to buy a singing bowl for each classroom.
Wow.
And while the children, I use this to tune in, while the children are breathing, I'll say, if your eyes are closed, wait until you can no longer hear the sound to open them. And so the nervous system heals itself through sound. So once again, you're calming and healing and regulating the nervous system by listening to this. And their eyes are closed.
That's cool.
And then I see when the sound ends, I see the children opening their eyes at slightly different rates. And I say, that's called focusing.
That is great. Who needs the Calm app? We have Amy Haysman.
Right. I'm about to take her class. Can you
That's
train
right.
me?
Yes,
Do you
I
have a singing
absolutely
bowl, Pete?
can.
I do.
So
I
I didn't know
do.
that was what it was called. I thought there was a different name for it. And it's funny you should say the Calm app because
Cereal bowl.
I was searching for. I thought it was a bell.
And
I thought it
Amy,
was a
you said
bell.
it's in every classroom?
At one particular school, I don't know if I can name the
Sure,
school.
that's right. But that's remarkable. So,
Can I name the school? Okay.
Yeah, sure.
I mean,
I
kudos to
can.
them. That's awesome.
Bob Mathis Elementary School
Good job.
in South Fulton.
Excellent.
And the principal and many of the teachers have taken Grounded Kids training, so they use this regularly in their school.
Have you ever had educators? I don't see kids resisting this because it's just so natural and right. But have you ever had educators or parents push back a little bit? Oh, I'm a little uncomfortable with this. How do you set them at ease when they're like, what are you doing with my kid? Have you had any of those type of conversations with people to say, hey, this is beneficial?
Yeah, complete transparency. This is what we're doing. This is what we're going to be doing in the classroom. Just tell them what you're doing. And I don't use, there's a yoga language, Sanskrit, where namaste came from. I don't have to use any other language other than English.
Sure.
If that's, what will make the parents in the school comfortable. I really haven't run into that very much at all. Because I don't expect that to happen, and I'm just very transparent. And it's all like, what I love to do is take these esoteric, seemingly complicated topics and just really get what's essential and make it very understandable so that it doesn't sound tricky or like we're trying to manipulate them in any way.
Beautiful.
Very wise.
Is there data being collected, or have we done any good studies that are starting to show the value in doing this in the classroom at these ages yet?
Absolutely. On my website, groundedkids.com, I have a whole research section where parents and teachers, anyone who's interested in this, can read. I mean, there's a lot. There's been a lot of research in the area of yoga and mindfulness in schools. Yes.
I'm thinking about, you mentioned breathing, and I want to say I saw something that you might do to help kids with regulating or notice their breathing. That's something that I've been trying to work on, especially in the last year and a half. I've noticed a couple times where I'm so stressed out. I don't think I'm holding my breath. And so
Yeah.
I've noticed that, and it's caused headaches, it's caused extra stress and anxiety. Did I see an exercise that you do using a feather?
Oh yeah, so that's what we do with the pre-grounders, with the really young ones. They hold a feather and they'll, lean forward and sniff the feather, and then they'll blow the feather. With the older kids, like 7 and up, the feather's good, but you can also use your fingers and blow on your fingers, and that feels kind of good. I mean, especially for children who have special needs, and STEM,
Yeah.
while they're doing that, they blow. And we have different, so in yoga, um, using Sanskrit, there's a word called mudra. All it means is a hand gesture. And I mean, we have hand gestures in our life, right? This is okay, and this is yeah, and then we have some not so pleasant ones. So there's a lot of nerve endings on our hands. And when we stimulate the nerve endings in our hands, these nerve endings take up a particularly large part of the brain. And so when we stimulate, it's very soothing, and it's a way to signal your brain to be in the moment. So we have a breath called Focus 5 breath. Start by touching your thumb to your pinky and take a breath in and out. Thumb to ring finger, breathe in and out. Thumb to middle finger, breathe in and out. Thumb to index finger, breathe in and out. Thumbs up, breathe in and out. And then you have your whole class like this with the thumbs up, which feels good anyway. When you do this, it's like, okay, yeah. And you've got your whole class here after taking 5 deep breaths and soothing their nervous system with the touch. And you don't have to fight against anything because you're actually physiologically making that change.
I really feel like, we're not saying, because they're not yoga teachers, you guys train very hard to do that. In fact, I know, Amy, you just came back from doing a training actually to train yoga teachers. But it sounds like some of these things are things that teachers can do in their classroom, whether it's just to get kids to focus, just to take a break for a minute from the academics, right? Even if it's just that little breathing exercise we just did, and then kind of shift over to whatever needs to be done next. Would you agree?
Absolutely. It's learning readiness. I mean, that's a term as educators that, learning readiness, prepare to learn. You can't learn when you're in your stress response, when you're not open to receiving information or even a breath, right? And so one of my favorite things to do is professional development for classroom teachers. And I always start with just a really short guided meditation. You don't even have to call it meditation. You can call it guided practice or guided
Mindfulness, right?
visualization.
Yeah.
Right. And I have them remember to think back to what brought them to this profession in the first place. Because we tend as teachers to forget why we are here. We're here because we're teaching children. We're not teaching, we're not, I never would say I teach language arts, I teach social studies. I would, what do you teach? I teach children through yoga. I teach children through, learning about language arts. You've got to keep the person first and foremost. And that goes for being a teacher as well. Remember what brought you to this profession. Try to remember that every day as your guiding light, because when your light goes out, you lose your way. And that passion that brought you to this field, you're going to need that fire to really make, your way in this, especially now.
Especially now.
Hearing that though, so I teach at the university level, and when I hear this, and I have 50 minutes to teach a topic that's in line with our goals of the course, it doesn't belong, right? It just doesn't fit, and yet it does fit, and I think that's another huge leap at that level. Like, so I teach in the sciences, and everything we're talking here seems like so much out of our realm, but yet it's in our realm, but it's not happening. And I just can't help but think that when they get to our level, after, say they do go through K through 12 and they're having these experiences, and then they get to this 4-year period of time where we completely throw it out the door, or we leave it up to them to find it on your own outside the classroom. But they're not going to do that. Most of them won't do that unless they're in the arts. But in the sciences, we're focused on that. And I would love to see that mindfulness somehow be woven back into some element of someone's curriculum. So if there's program coordinators out there or deans listening to this, that wellness, that word that we throw around, especially in this COVID era, that we all pay lip service to, would be much better practiced if we kind of embrace some of these simple exercises. Like, I was just thinking, the next exam that I give, not even the next exam, we're going to practice just doing that breathing. I've seen kids stop breathing during exams and you have to, like, hey, what's going on? And sometimes I'll tap something on the desk just to make sure that they're okay, because they'll just like freeze up. So,
Yeah.
Wow.
Absolutely.
I'm glad that Fred mentioned this, because so Amy, he also does stuff with Get Me Coding. So he helps kids learn how to code. And so Fred, before we came on, I actually found a little article or a blog by Francois Watts. I will send it to you. And it's How Yoga Helped Me Become a Better Programmer.
Oh, wow. See
so
that?
They're a programmer for Google. And it got me thinking as I'm reading it, kind of like when you're sitting there trying to code all day, or you're sitting in front of a computer all day, it can be stressful. It can be frustrating. Your body, like Amy and Letitia talked about, is giving you signals of like, this is not good for you to be doing all day long. And so basically, in a nutshell, the article is saying how using yoga throughout the day actually helped them be a better programmer and a healthier person.
Wow. Yes, I mean that.
Of the, like, you can reference people like Bill Gates and other like really successful business people. They meditate. And if you ask them, I've listened to many podcasts where very, very successful people will be asked the question, what's the secret to your success? What's one thing that, you have to share? And it's always a personal practice, like a yoga practice or a mindfulness practice or a meditation. It's never like this book knowledge. We can get all the book knowledge, and we have resources and information at our fingertips. But what's going to make you successful is knowing who you are and being able to regulate your energy, your emotions, your responses in the world. So you're not just a reaction. That's what's going to make somebody successful. And in this day and age, set yourself apart by bringing forward what makes you unique. And that's what you can count on and rely on to be successful.
I love that so much. So who was a teacher or a mentor or coach somewhere in your life that inspired you, or you feel like kind of gave you this spark?
Well, I did not have an easy time as a student particularly in middle school. So that's what really made me want to become a teacher, is I was like, I can do this better. And when I was in high school, I remember I had a really horrible fight within my family in the morning. And I went to school just in tears and hysterical crying. And I went to the counselor and I could barely talk. I was crying so hard. And what she said to me calmed me down, and I've never forgotten it. And she said, you're not responsible for how anyone else reacts to you and what you do. You're only responsible for your own actions, not how anyone else responds or reacts. Because I felt like everything was my fault. And so that really stuck with me. And then in college, one of my professors at UGA was I think she might have even coined this term. I'm not sure, but it was Dr. Brenda Manning. And she taught me about the term self-regulation. And it was like the self-regulated classroom. It wasn't even so much about like regulating your nervous system. It was like managing how to teach children how to be responsible for their own, world, so that teachers and parents aren't constantly reminding. And that really was empowering to me. Like, okay, I have inside what it takes to be, to do life. Life is hard. And, anything that we can teach that helps with life skills is valuable.
I love that.
That was good advice.
Yeah.
Well, I wish we could talk to you forever and ever and get a few more yoga tips, because a couple of those things were really great. Um, but sadly, we have to start winding down here. Maybe we'll get the singing bowl out to wind it down. But I'm gonna change it up, guys. Normally, Amy, we do a takeaway from the conversation. So if there's a takeaway you really, really want to share, of course, share it. But I'm thinking maybe I'd like to hear from each of you if you have something that helps you to be grounded. Like, is there one thing that you can think of? And if so, what is that helps you to feel grounded? Who would like to go first? I see you thinking.
Grounded.
So a practice, an item, anything to stay grounded.
Yeah, so I'll give you an example. When I'd walk outside and just go for a walk, because what I find is it helps me to take in the fresh air, see the trees, just feeling like I don't have a ceiling over my head, like it's that open air, right? Especially if it's a nice blue sky. It helps me to feel grounded. When I come back from the walk, I feel a little bit changed, a little bit more calm.
I love that idea of no ceiling.
Yeah.
Always out the box, aren't you?
I am. I know.
I would have to say for me, and we've talked about this on prior episodes too, about our certain rituals we've developed maybe recently in the morning or in our evenings. I think something that I've noticed more prominently these past few weeks is the routine of, I know this may sound like I'm latching onto something, but taking a cup of coffee while the morning is still early before the day takes off and enjoying a window. So I'm in the Northeast in Pennsylvania, and it's not an involved event, but it's a simple, mindful look out the window, watching the leaves kind of move with the breeze, or seeing the light come down through the trees, and then just taking it in for just a moment. It's a stop. It's a complete stop.
Good. I'm glad you have that. How about you, Letitia? Did you think of something?
I love the simplicity of that, Fred. It is super powerful. I love that. I love that. So I am a morning person, and my morning ritual is like oxygen. And now with my new work setting, I have a tank. I need a whole full tank of oxygen. But every morning, I do a devotional. I do my yoga with Bird, and I do my meditation. I mean, with coffee. I know the coffee's probably not healthiest, but hey, I'm a work in progress. But those three things together are just that's what grounds me. It gives me the calm that I need, and just the presence of mind throughout the day. So that's my thing, my ritual, my morning ritual.
Good. I'm glad you have that. How about you, Pete?
So, I think I've shared, I'm a lifelong stutterer, and I've had anxiety issues my whole life and all. And I learned a long time ago, being a singer and whatnot, I learned different breathing exercises, the importance of breathing. Breathing cannot be underestimated. So whenever I feel like things are revving up, I go back to my roots of a singer and breathing, and I do the hand, the 5. And I've done that with my students. I've done it with my chorus. We do it before shows, because if you're tense, you're not going to emote. Never mind, you're not going to be able to learn. You're also not going to emote. And when you're being in a performance setting, that's everything. So, like Amy said, it takes time for the nervous system to reset, and the breathing helps get everything in balance, stabilized, and then you can move on. And it's a really great first line of defense for whatever life is throwing at you. So that's been my first thing. The next thing is learning what type of person I am. When I learned I'm more of an introvert than an extrovert, even though I'm in a lot of extroverted positions, I've learned that, all right, that just means I need more time to recharge. So I don't stop myself from those moments to recharge. I learned what times, like Letitia just said, what times of the day am I most on fire, that I'm really working on all cylinders, and what times of the day I really need to pull back a little bit. When I learned that more about myself, more in adulthood, I think it benefited everything: my teaching, my work, my output, my family life. So listen to yourself, learn about yourself, and don't underestimate the power of breathing.
Good. Thanks, Pete. And that kind of goes back to what Amy was saying, that we are in control of our own lives. Pay attention to the inward and the outward. Amy, we'll give you the last word here. What's one thing that you like to do to stay grounded?
Well, to me, when I feel not grounded, I put myself in water, like a bathtub or a shower, or go swimming, or even put water inside. I've made it through this whole glass. I require just whatever type of water it is reminds me of flow and healing and cleansing. And to me, water is magical. And it has those properties where it really helps me settle. And I ask this question to students all the time. And I am so aware and impressed by the information that they're saying grounds them, like what they do to ground now. Yesterday, kids shared they pet their dogs, they talk to their therapist, they meditate, they talk to their father. Like, just, I'm really hopeful for the future of these. I'm really, really hopeful. And I'm seeing, I mean, when I first started teaching yoga in the early 2000s, it was weird, and children like had no clue what this is. And now I really am seeing every single day that it's more mainstream, it's acceptable. Kids are craving it and hungry for it and wanting it. So I'm so hopeful that this will become just another part of our school day.
Great. And if our listeners want to connect with you, where can they find you, Amy?
The website's groundedkids.com. My email is Amy, A-M-Y, @groundedkids.com. I'm on Instagram, Grounded Kids Yoga, and Facebook as well, Grounded Kids.
Great. Well, thank you so much for
Fantastic.
coming here and sharing so many great thoughts and ideas. We really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Pete, where can our listeners find us?
teacherpeprally.com is our website. And gosh, we have our first giveaway going on our Facebook page. We're giving away a book from last week's guest, Dr. Janot, The Disintegrated Student. Great stuff. Time's running out on that. So check that out. We would love to have as many. And there it is, Fred.
Bam.
Enter our giveaway.
Yeah, come and
Fred will
join,
deliver it
subscribe to
your
YouTube,
house.
because you'll get to watch this episode with Amy and see us doing a little bit of yoga. Pete's got one eye open and one eye closed, but
That's because I was near Fred.
we had some great exercises that we can model for you. So thanks again, everyone. And thanks, Amy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amy.
This was awesome.